Welcome to all of you. Carissa, let me start with you, if I may. You've had experience with this issue. From your perspective, from your firsthand knowledge of this, would you say that this presentation of this issue in this film is accurate? Yes, no, somewhat different?
Yeah, so I would say it is certainly accurate in its description of a sort of a particular subset of early marriages. So marriage by capture, which is what's being depicted in the film, is a phenomenon and one that isn't completely isolated to Ethiopia. It occurs in a pretty diverse array of countries, Kyrgyzstan, South Africa, among some ethnic groups. But it is certainly a minority of all early marriages in the world. And so the vast majority don't involve the abduction component of the story. But it is an accurate, I think, a pretty accurate portrayal of that particular phenomenon.
And Gada, as was said in your introduction, from Syria, a country which we all know is in the midst of a nightmare where many lives are affected in many different ways. How can you talk about this from a Syrian perspective where so many cameras are not present and we really have very little visual knowledge of the personal destructions going on there? What can you say about the topic from your perspective?
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the chance to speak for Syria and for children of Syria, for women of Syria. First of all, I'm not here to bring your tears. I'm here to ask you to do something for women of Syria and to children of Syria. First, support education for Syria. I believe that this is the main issues which we have and we must concentrate on. We can do nothing. We cannot bring peace to Syria right now because of chaos, upside down. The only things which we can do all together, support education for children of Syria, for those 3 million children who's out of school right now, who's struggling in the refugee camps besides inside Syria. There's many options which we can all support these issues by, first of all, we can support women of Syria through targeting care by psychological support program. This is the most needed right now. The other things, support education and push and put all our pressure on this government in the hosted countries to accept Syrian children in their schools for public, for free. Or otherwise we can support this simple initiative, such as recently there's the government, they run an initiative which is called No Lost Generation. It's a drop in ocean, but I believe that we can start by supporting education just to stop this early child marriage inside Syria and in the refugee camp. Thank you.
Thank you. And George, let me ask you maybe a two-part question. It was clear from the film the trauma that this had inflicted on this young woman throughout the ordeal. So I would ask you to maybe comment on that, and if possible, years after this happens, how does this play out over time as an individual who undergoes this kind of trauma survives it or tries to move on with it, and how does it play out? What is it? Is there a generality of how it plays out across the world as these young individuals, these young women age?
Well, there's a lot of stuff there. So let me just start by talking a little bit about the trauma and qualify it by saying there isn't much research on this problem of child marriage, but as Beverly's excellent introduction to the problem is, there's lots of negative effects on the well-being of girls who are married. Child marriage refers to anything below the age of 18. So we could be talking about a 7-year-old getting married or a 17-year-old getting married. So it's a very heterogeneous phenomena, and including the abduction that we saw, but also it's economic arrangement by parents sometimes, or it's a way of getting out of poverty, for someone, for a girl. So it's a lot of different circumstances. And it could be, there was a story about a girl from Yemen who was forced, she was a 10-year-old girl, she was forced to marry a 50-year-old man who it was quite heavy. When she saw him, she started screaming. And subsequently, she left and was removed to his village, lived with him, but was given a cell phone. Every day she would call her sister crying, giving you the flavor. She was still traumatized and continuing to be. So there's lots of trauma involved. There's often a lot of physical and psychological abuse that goes on in these marriages. There's dramatic power disparities, so power and control over the young girl. So there's a lot of problems which can result then in depression, suicidality thoughts, all kinds of psychological consequences that continue. These young girls who then often become pregnant can have various medical problems, certainly are high risk for premature birth, so give birth to a premature baby, and then that has long-term sequelae also. So there's all kinds of consequences down the road as the young girls develop and age, and then their older husbands die, and so they're left as widows without sources of income, and so they're in poverty, etc. So all kinds of problems.
Just a comment, and then because of time, we'll turn this to you for your questions to the panel. I think it's clear in a film like this, it's not a cliche. However much you and I hear this cliche, it's not a cliche to say it's a man's world in many ways, that men in many countries make the laws, and frequently laws are made to the detriment of women, or customary laws that courts abide by in rural areas. And it's not you, and it's likely not anybody you know, and it's not us, and maybe not people we know, but this is not an isolated phenomenon that is happening in this film. This is a norm for many, many, many young females in this world. It does cry out as to what countries are committed to for the defense, protection, and advocacy of the rights of women, and I should say the rights of females, in this case, single-digit age girls or very young girls. And it's a lot of effort that this country needs to be a signatory to. We have not ratified the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and we have not signed nor ratified the Convention for the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. It would behoove us to hold our own elected officials accountable so that they do more than pay lip service by standing before us and telling us they care about family values when this country is absent from the defense of rights of children and women. Let's turn this to y'all for these panelists, and please, I'm going to ask you to give a loud voice. So who has a question? Please.
Where would I go? Is there a website where I can support education in Syria?
And I'm just going to repeat the question just to make sure everybody has heard it. You're asking where can you go to, is there a website that helps in the support of education?
Yes, there's many, but for the time being, if you need it urgent and now you need help, you can connect through Mrs. Beverly. We have a lot of initiative. We can talk with it extensively and give you the details about how can you help.
Okay, thank you.
Just in terms of the pervasiveness of the problem, I've seen estimates, it's 20 million girls. Do you know some other statistics about how many girls go through child marriage?
Yeah, well, we're looking at somewhere in the vicinity of 40% of girls in Asia who get married before age 18, 30-something% in Africa, and then it goes down from there. But, so yeah, I mean, in any given year, off the top of my head, I'm not sure I can do the math on that, but we are talking about, I think, somewhere in the vicinity of 60 million girls who got married before age 18 in the first 10 years of the 21st century. And not everyone who's getting married before age 18 is getting married at 17 or 16. In some cases, we're talking about adolescent girls. That's a smaller percentage. It is predominantly girls in the sort of 15 to 17 range that we're talking about here. But early marriage among truly children does also occur.
And these statistics, while probably not as high, of course, as other parts of the world, they are in our own country as well. It is legal in this country, of course, to get married below the age of 18, which is still considered child marriage.
And violates the Convention on the Rights of the Child.
Which we haven't signed.
We haven't signed.
So these are our issues. Question for one of these good people. Please, and give it a loud voice.
Actually, you just touched on what I was about to ask, because I happen to know of a young girl. I believe she's now 18, but I think she might have been 17 at the time when her parents were placing a lot of pressure on her to get married. And she has left home and is homeless now and seeking shelter at some of the social service agencies. So I was just wondering, and this is right here in Dallas, so I was just wondering if any of the panel experts have more to say about that in terms of local statistics.
She's saying that there are cases of children, girls below the age of 18 getting married in Dallas. It's a problem here as well. And is there any knowledge of statistics of that incident here to any of our knowledge?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, as a ratio, it would have to be something very, very low.
Did she mean Syrians? Oh,
No.
in general.
Just in general.
Oh, in general.
Yeah.
I'm afraid not.
Sir?
It's the case, I suppose, that child marriage has an adverse effect on education for girls, but what is the situation apart from that with respect to education of girls worldwide? I know that's let me stop there.
Well, education for anybody. Education is a fundamental human right for anybody. And the denial of education for anybody, for any reason, is a violation of those rights. Most of the people in this world who are denied access to education are females. And this is a global issue around the world. It happens in countries that we are friendly to, such as Turkey, and it happens in countries which ideologically are at vast difference from our own. But it is a global problem.
On the positive side, though, I mean, I think this is actually one of the areas where the most progress is being made worldwide. So if you think about the Millennium Development Goals, which cover a whole wide range of development issues, including education, but also health and economic development. One of the bigger successes in achieving those goals has been in closing the gender gap in terms of primary education. This is not to say that it has closed, but it is closing relatively rapidly. Still, the bigger gaps are in secondary education, where even though now we have a lot more girls in the developing world getting through primary school, it's making that leap to secondary school, which is going to have a real impact on their lives, and that's where a lot of the progress still needs to be made.
I want to add some facts about Syria before this war. It's a fact that prior to the conflict, the primary school enrollment rate in Syria was 99%. Lower secondary school enrollment grade from 7th to 9th was 82%. Today, nearly 3 million Syrians out of school. Just see how much this war affected us as Syrians.
One Go ahead, sir.
So, for Dr. Cloud or for anybody, in terms of child marriage, my question is based around, in a lot of the countries where it's more prevalent, is it more so a cultural norm in the sense, is it more so, individual communities where it's considered acceptable? Or are there a lot of countries where on a governmental level it's kind of institutionalized and recognized by the state?
So there actually has been a big change in terms of the legal status of early marriage over the past couple of decades. So increasingly, legal age of marriage is being raised. There are a couple of complications here. One is, as you sort of saw in the film, that a lot of countries in the developing world have multiple legal systems. So there's sort of a national legal system, but then also systems of religious law or customary law, which may govern a lot of areas related to the family, and thus women are going to be significantly implicated there. And it's not always 100% clear which set of laws is going to trump which other set of laws at any time. In terms of why early marriages are occurring, it does vary a lot globally. So the reasons are not always the same in every place. There is certainly a strong cultural element. But again, the particular cultural purpose is going to be different from one place to another. It may be related to ensuring that girls are in fact virgins at marriage. So the younger the girl gets married, the more confidence that the husband's family has that she will in fact be a virgin. So in that sense, it's related to cultural expectations about the appropriate role of women. In a lot of cases, the motive is heavily economic. So you've got both countries where dowry is common and countries where bride price is common experiencing higher rates of early marriage. So where bride price is paid, that can be a real incentive to marry off a daughter if you're experiencing a period of financial hardship as a family. You no longer have to support the girl yourself, and you sort of get the payment of the bride price from the husband or the husband's family. So that can be a significant incentive. So you see rates of early marriage going up in times of drought or civil war. And then in countries where dowry is common, in a lot of cases, so the money is sort of going in the other direction. But expectation, like India, but the expectation often is that the amount of the dowry is going to increase as girls get more educated and are older. So marrying a girl early means paying out a smaller dowry. So all of these incentives can kind of combine to make early marriage seem like an attractive option.
Time for one last question and then a final comment. Anybody with a question for anyone on the panel?
What can we do, and I direct this particularly to Dr. Cloward, what can somebody here do?
I think we've actually seen in the last few years a substantially increased level of attention to early marriage. So where there wasn't sort of a lot of good research in the past and there weren't a lot of organizations working on that has really started to change. So if you want to support an organization working to end child marriages, you've got some good choices now. One NGO in particular that I really like is Population Council. They work in a number of African countries. They have done rigorous evaluations of anti-early marriage projects that do seem to have had a meaningful effect for the girls themselves. If you're interested in supporting anti-early marriage projects in a particular country, a good place to look for organizations working there is the larger transnational network Girls Not Brides, which has come about in the last few years and is a network now of some, I think, 700 different NGOs working all over the world to address child marriage. So they're a coordinating function, but you can learn about the specific member organizations that they have working all over the world. If you're inclined to support, say, for example, an NGO working in Syria or an NGO working in a particular location.
Okay, we have word that they think it's running again. We're gonna try. We'll give it a try. If it fails, we'll all leave. Thank you so much. I apologize.
I know they're fixing to turn out the lights so we can hopefully see this, but I would be remiss if I didn't add this in 30 seconds. 9 months from this month, we all go to the polls. This is your issue. This isn't just happening somewhere else in the world. We are going to cast a vote for a president, and that person, in my very biased opinion, has a moral duty to lead this country regarding the advocacy, protection, and defense of human rights for all people, not just in this country, but around the world. And it is incumbent on all of us to demand, whoever that president is going to be, that they make his or her position known to us so we know if we're going to vote for somebody who we can support on issues like this. Hold these people accountable. Thank you.